Hi, everyone. Welcome to chapter one of our textbook. We're going to start with talking about some basics like ecology in children and families. And one of the major concepts we will focus on is socialization. So, here we go. Okay, so let's talk about human ecology. Ecology is the study of interrelationships between an organism and their environment. You could study animals. Here, of course, we're going to focus on humans. How do they form relationships? How are they influenced or socialized by their environment? We have three domains of development, and they're sometimes referred to in different ways. We have the biological or the physical domain, we have the psychological or the cognitive domain, and we have the cultural or the social emotional domain. So I wanted to show you that here on my next slide. Here's just kind of a summary of these domains. So again, what is a domain? Well, it's ways that we change or develop over time. So look at the physical domain. Think about an infant growing into an adult. Their body size, their body proportions, all of that is going to go through major change over time. Their motor development, things like fine and gross motor skills will become more refined. The cognitive domain, again, our thinking as a young child is very different than our thinking as an adolescent or an adult. So that process of growing up, we develop that cognitive domain and develop our thinking capacities. And lastly is that social emotional domain, the combination between the child and their emotions within a social environment. So again, there's a lot of things about the self, but there's also parts about understanding others and having interpersonal relationships. So I'm going to go back one slide. Again, it's important for us to realize that as we are forming relationships and being socialized, we are also developing within those three domains of development. And as we develop in those contexts, it starts to affect all other areas of our life. So let's look a little deeper into that. So we can think about how the domains are connected. Yes, they're very different, right? How we're physically growing, how we're cognitively growing, and how we're socially and emotionally growing. But they are also connected. So I have here all these questions. I'll just kind of go to my next slide with my answers. Let's go ahead and list those out here. So, how does a child's actions affect other domains? For instance, if we were focused on a child physically being able to shake a rattle, what is he learning in his cognitive domain? Well, he's learning about cause and effect, right? Oh, when I shake this rattle, I hear this sound. So that physical action starts to make a cognitive connection for the child. What about a 2-year-old having a conversation with grandma? So again, that's cognitive, developing language, but it's also developing a relationship and an attachment. So that would fall in another domain. So you can review the other examples here, but I just wanted to give you examples of how we can all be looking at the same event, but we might focus on a different domain and how that child is developing. Okay, I don't know why my slide is not changing here. Okay, so let's talk now about socialization. So here's the definition for socialization. And again, it's pretty similar to influence. How do we acquire the knowledge, the skills, and the character traits that make us who we are and make us able to participate within society? So again, we've been influenced by many things in our lives, and we've in turn influenced those areas also. So think about, how have you been socialized in your life? By whom? By what? By where? I mean, it's not always a person, right? It can be an event, it can be a location, it can be a lot of different elements. So again, socialization agents are based on many different experiences. You can see here in this circle, we have a child. but he is also connected to family, to school, to peers, to his religious community. Again, it's kind of similar to the bioecological model, right? Where we're influenced by all of these socializing agents with around us. Okay, so we're not going to do the poll. We're not going to do the small group activity. So socialization, again, is unique to humans. We don't really see the influence as much in animals because, again, a lot of it is through means of communication. So socialization is occurring through establishing relationships. Now, we might intentionally socialize someone and we might unintentionally. And again, that's where we want to be cognizant about our behaviors and our actions. So, when we're intentionally socializing someone, we're meaning to convey a value or a rule or something, a moral, right, important to us. And examples of that, you tell your child to share their toy with their friend. That's intentional. You have a very clear directive and it's something you want them to do, and it's also something, again, you're influencing them and teaching them how to do. Your child throws a tantrum, you remove him or her from the situation, and you talk about the behaviors that you want to see, right? That's intentional. You're intentionally trying to change the behavior of your child in a positive way so that they are able to interact with their social environment. Now, I mentioned we have unintentional socialization. And if you're a parent, you probably realize you do this a lot where you're not really thinking about your reaction, but your child, uh, sees it and observes it. So, how does that then, without deliberately intending to, how does that influence the child? You and your spouse argue in front of your child. Again, how you handle conflicts, you're now showing your child and modeling for them how to handle conflicts. So even if you didn't intentionally want to teach them to maybe yell at someone when they're in a disagreement, they start to pick that up from observing you. You assist a stranger in need. Again, you didn't plan on that, it happened. But through your action, you unintentionally showed your child what sometimes you do when someone needs help, right? The child is again maybe learning a positive thing from assisting and maybe learning a not so positive thing from arguing, right? So we can unintentionally influence or socialize those around us in positive and negative ways. Okay. So again, socialization, it's reciprocal. It's a two-way interaction and it's dynamic. It's constantly changing, right? Based on our experiences. It has a lot to do with your maturation level. How old are you? What are your cognitive abilities? What were the genes passed to you from your parents? Again, that leads you with kind of a foundation to start with. And then what we're going to get into now is temperament. How does a child's temperament affect their ability to be socialized? So if you look here, temperament are innate characteristics that determine sensitivity to experiences and overall responses. And it's something that we're born with. Okay, so temperament, we will talk a little bit more about for your um, additional information this week of tasks, but we have three styles of temperament: easy, difficult, and slow to warm up. And they're very similar to how they sound, but this is how a child is born. It's their initial reaction and overall mood. And children are just born with different tendencies, right? So some children are so easygoing, good natured, adaptable, smiling, happy, can be passed from person to person, just overall easygoing. Then you have the opposite children, right? The difficult, moody, intense, maybe tantrums, heart difficulty calming down, and then the slow to warm up are in between. Originally, they seem negative, they stand back, but once they're comfortable, they'll start integrating themselves with others. So you're going to do a temperament assessment. Um, Again, here's some more information about temperament in case you are interested, and there's a video clip on Blackboard for you. So that leads us to the question, do you think your temperament can change over time, and what might contribute to the change? Well, temperament is a mixture of your genetic information passed down by your parents and your interactions with the environment and the nurturing you receive and parenting, all your relationships. So think about if you have a very difficult child, but they have a understanding parent who sets up the environment so they can succeed, that child may become less difficult over time. So you will be doing an adult temperament assessment. It's a little bit different. There's 4 different temperaments, but I would like you to do that on Blackboard and get a little understanding of your own temperament. All right. So again, we're not doing the handout, you're doing it on Blackboard. And there's 4 different types. So you'll have some time to read about those and see what your outcome was. There's a guardian, an artisan, an idealist, and a rationalist. So I'm looking forward to hearing what categories you fall under. And then here are some famous people that fall into those categories. And I think part of my question to you is, do you feel it was accurate? Do you agree with the assessment? All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about socialization, but now within an ecological context. So again, we talked about Bronfenbrenner 2 weeks ago, and then you did an activity with him last week. So this is just kind of a review. Remember, he has 5 systems: micro, meso, exo, macro, and chrono. So I do have this video on Blackboard for you. I'd like you to get a little understanding of where Bronfenbrenner came from, so please watch that video. Again, here's the depiction. Chronosystem is over time. And I'm currently in the process of looking over your models and grading them. So we will talk more about that as we go through the weekly module. So just to talk about macro system specifically, sometimes we have a low context macro system or a high context macro system, depending on where it is that we live. So low context macro systems are things that, are societies that aim towards progress. So it's very much about the individual competing against each other, moving forward to achieve personal freedom, evidence, facts. So that's considered a low context macro system. Others might up in a society that's very culturally based. Feelings, identity, traditions, cooperation, the goodness of the group. So again, think about if your culture falls under more of a high context, but you live in the United States that's very progressive. So children many times have a conflict in their macro system of kind of how they're interacting. And again, it's what they're exposed to, and specifically when they're young, it's what their parents are allowing them to be exposed to. And again, when might these interact? With specifically people who are living in the United States but come from a different culture. That may be an interaction where they're on 2 different playing fields and having to, go through that process. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this part. Let me just pause it really quickly. And we'll conclude this chapter talking about contemporary ecology. So these are different areas that fall under contemporary: biotechnology, different information, technology. I decided just to concentrate on biotechnology. I think it's interesting to see how things have changed over time and just kind of give us an understanding of what is biotechnology. So biotechnology, one form, is genetic engineering. So what is genetic engineering, or GMOs, genetically engineered food, or GMOs, genetically modified food, right? So It's a plant or meat product that's had its DNA artificially altered in a laboratory. Now, that's led to many great things. It's also led to many scary things. So, our discussion board this week will look at biotechnology and kind of talk about how it's influenced our society, whether it was positive or negative. So, I have a video about GMOs. Again, there are benefits of genetic modification. We've done certain modification to um, animals, for example, to get better milk, better eggs, better meat. But again, through modifying them, have we changed something within their DNA that may not be a positive? We don't really know. But again, higher resistance to disease. And the information here came from science at US Department of Energy and the United Nations for Food and Agriculture. Now, what are some of the negatives? Many times they contain antibiotics. They may have allergies that we don't even know about. We're tampering with the environment, with science. And again, we don't always know how that is going to play out. Many times they have an increased amount of pesticides, herbicides. Again, it can be a dangerous area in terms of modifying our food and where we get our food from. So I have a little video about GMOs and pink slime. That's a genetically modified, we genetically modify our meat and add pink slime. So something for you to learn about. Now, again, we're not doing small groups. Instead, we're doing a discussion board. So please go back to Blackboard and make sure that you connect to the rest of your classmates about biotechnology. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Don't forget to do your chapter quiz, and please email me with any questions.